I think because Alex and I have the more comprehensive ones. Gabe, are you comfortable speaking first?
Uh, uh, yeah, basically.
Okay, so then I can go second, and then Alex will close it off.
Okay.
At what?
You guys always put me at the back for this kind of stuff.
Because you have a lot to talk about.
I guess so. This is also just one world, too.
Oh my.
I'm not going to talk about the other ones, probably.
Oh my god.
They're very different.
Do you see now why you are our main event, Alex? There's so much within your multiverse. Hi friends, welcome back to the InkGuild Podcast. My name is Dean, joined today by Alex and Gabe. Do you guys want to say hi?
Hello.
Hey.
Sweet. So, tonight we're going to be talking about our magic systems. It's going to be a bit of a long discussion, I'm not going to lie, but I do want to touch on something really quick, and that is, because all three of us have at one point or another written fantasy, either completely or kind of maybe just meddled in it. We've had to face the very creative but also very frustrating thing that is the magic system. And before I kind of get everyone's respective opinions on what it's been like building their own, I just want to go over quickly like the 12 rules that I found it super imperative to building one. And I know that sounds kind of boring, but like, it's something that's definitely helped me build my magic system. And because after this short discussion, all we're going to be talking about is our magic system. So maybe you just wanted a quick know-how on everything. So yeah, so the 12 questions on how to properly build a magic system are as follows. 1, how is it learned and executed? 2, how is it accessed? 3, does it have a will of its own? 4, is it restricted in time and space? 5, what does available magic do? 6, how does it relate to the character, plot, and theme of the book? 7, what is the cost? 8, what can it not do? 9, how long does it last? 10, who can use it? 11, how do others react to it? And 12, why haven't people using this power taken over the world? So, why I wanted to highlight that is, like I said, it has been a very important factor for me determining my own magic system. And, I wanted to ask the question to you guys, actually, like, what has it been like developing your own?
It's kind of been a wild ride of like constant changing and editing and like tweaking here and there. It's something that never really feels like done for me.
Mm-hmm. Alex, how about you?
It's kind of hard to explain, but it's definitely like finding the balance is really something I find really difficult, because it's like, oh, magic is cool, I want my characters to be powerful, but obviously there has to be restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding that balance I've found is a struggle sometimes, but it's also really fun to come up with how magic works and how people use it, like especially in a fantasy world where magic is like it's like an everyday thing. Mm-hmm. Which is pretty common in some of my stories. It's really fun figuring out how that changes the society that the characters live in from ours.
Yeah. Like there's so many things that go into making a very interesting magic system. It's not just, like what elements you're controlling, what kind of like, what kind of abilities your characters are capable of, but it's also like just how, I guess, realistic it is. And by realistic, I mean like how grounded it is, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think you guys have heard me say this, but I've long had a pet peeve when it comes to magic systems, in that if it's overpowered, it won't make for a good story.
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's why I had those 12 rules there, or that's why I stated the 12 rules there for not just myself, but like any fantasy writer out there who is, who's wanting to develop a magic system. Like, there is a lot more that goes into it than just letting your main character play with fire out of nowhere, right? Like, if suddenly that fire is the main thing that gets them out of every situation, then your story won't be interesting, right? There has to be consequences, there has to be this and that and whatever. And I won't go super into that because, I don't want this intro to be too long. But yeah, with that little intro out of the way, I just want to explain a few quick rules for everyone listening and for us right now, because explaining our magic systems is going to be a very long discussion. So what's going to happen is, obviously I'll be leaving timestamps in the description, but it'll be Gabe speaking on his first for what's your story, or like, which are you focusing on a specific story, or just
Yeah, it's on a I've mentioned the Glass Inferno recently. It's part of a series called the Night Reaver Saga. So
okay.
That'll
All right, so that's the magic system that Gabe will be focusing on. I will be focusing on my magic system from Xeno, which is, as of right now, in its first book. And Alex will be focusing on the magic system from Guitariana, which is the setting from the Diamond Dagger, right?
The Diamond Dagger and several other stories, most of which are currently untitled.
Okay, so it'll likely be in that order, and I guess we'll just be, going over some of the more interesting aspects of it, and showing diagrams, reading examples. It'll be a really, really geeky PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
Without the actual PowerPoint presentation. So hope you guys enjoy. And to kick us all off, we'll start with Gabe.
Okay, so in the world of the Glass Inferno, there are. I don't want to go into too much detail about this because we're planning on doing a Gods and Myths episode on a later date. But there's a creature at the center of reality known as the Leviathan. And the Leviathan is essentially a massive cosmic entity that appears to be a whale to most people who see it. It's a giant celestial being that creates the universe through its breath, and frequently the Leviathan will shed scales. It has these small little fragments that just shed and turn into space dust as it flows throughout the cosmos, and eventually those scales reached the world of Ildry, which is the world that the Glass Inferno is set in. As it settled into the earth and people started to take up the planet, people started developing these abilities, I guess you could call them, which are in this world they're called codes. A person's code is essentially a personal extension of their willpower, to physical embodiment of their spirit, and it gives them it doesn't give them all kinds of magical abilities. They're not like a catch-all. It gives them a very specific and personal sort of magic that they can use. Almost all Ildren people possess a code of some kind or another, but a strength of a code is determined by the person. So if someone, say, has a mundane code, like a flame code, for example, they can manifest as tiny flame, like a lighter flame at the tip of their finger. That's their code. They can do that. But with heavy training and lots of work, they might manifest that into a more advanced flame code, and they might become something like a pyromancer or something. But if they don't train, if they just want to be a normal person, they will just have a very normal code. The codes in Ildry are separated into 7 categories. There are. I'm going to send you a sketch of this later, Sadine. You can throw that up on the screen.
Cool.
There are control codes, power codes, aura codes, summoner codes, blood codes, relic codes, and devil codes.
You sent the you sent a quick diagram on the Discord. Can I fire that up right now?
You can put that up right now for reference. I'll send you something later for when you upload this and upload this.
Yeah. All right. So I fired it up. It looks really cool.
Thank you. I did it while I was during my shift. So
Nice.
I sort of just grabbed a Nebula JPEG and just slapped some words on it. So control codes are pretty self-explanatory, and by a wide margin, they're the most common code variant. So a control code is a code that allows the user to manipulate their environment in a specific way. Their code strain is connected to a specific element or a type of object or even certain bodily functions. They can't use their code to exert a force beyond the limits of what they control is capable of, but how far they can take their code depends on how much they train with it and whether or not they've met certain activation requirements for it. That depends on the code. So I've got some examples right here on my little nifty Word document. The first example is called Puppeteer, which allows the user to take control of another person's nervous system, puppeting their body beyond their mind's control. So the person would still be conscious during all this, but they would have no ability to control their movements. However,
sorry to interject, but would that be kind of like bloodbending?
No, they have physical like threads that come out of their fingers and latch into a
badass.
That's sick. However, they cannot make their puppet do something that their body would be physically incapable of. So if they want their puppet to open a heavy door, and then that puppet wouldn't have the strength to do that, then they can't open that door, for example, or they can't move their body in a certain way that the person wouldn't be able to do naturally. I can only control a person to the limit of what that person would naturally be able to do. The second example I have is biomass, which allows the user to morph the shape and properties of their own muscles and body fat to sort of expand or shrink their body. However, they cannot expand their muscles beyond what is naturally possible for a human body to achieve. And the third example I have is Trigger, which allows the user to telekinetically control any form of firearm, but they cannot fire. This one's pretty self-explanatory. They can't fire more bullets from a gun than what would be in the gun's magazine. They can't manifest bullets. They basically have what they get if they're faced with a room full of guns.
Okay.
The second form of code, and the most common in the actual story, is power codes. A lot of the story involves military and organized crime, and power codes are very common amongst these groups. Power codes typically emanate from a user's hand and act as a direct extension of their willpower. People's hands are used to accomplish most of their tasks, and a power code emanates as sort of an extension of that. Power codes, hang on, I'm just reading. Power codes are among Relic Codes and Devil Codes in that each code is completely unique to the user and cannot be replicated until the current user's death. They also require very specific activation requirements, but if those activation requirements are fulfilled, the user can tap into a very great amount of power. So the first example I have is called Chimera Crimson. The user manifests their will in the form of a red ball of plasma that the user can use against another person. The user of Chimera Crimson must say the target's name and then allot enough time to manifest the ability. If the user knows the target's name, age, and blood type, then the user can launch Chimera Crimson into a projectile that tracks the target and destroys anything in its path to reach it. But the ability can only be used on a full moon. The second one is Godspeed, which is less of a aggressive magic. It's more of a agility, I guess. The user manipulates the gravity in their feet and their skin's density, allowing them to reach incredible speeds. The code's only activation requirement is that the user must have a specific destination in mind that they want to reach at an extreme speed. If they just want to go fast, they can't manifest the will to control either the gravity or their own skin's density. And if they can't do that, then either they won't be able to move fast, or the air pressure from moving that fast will literally tear their skin off. The third example I have is called Damnation, which is the user. I'm gonna, again, this is another thing I'm gonna touch on in the Gods and Myths episode. There's a form of hell in this universe called the Abyss, and the Damnation essentially transports both themselves as well as single or multiple targets into the depths, into the very pit of the abyss for 12 seconds. The user can only activate Damnation by painting sigils of the abyss and then having their target come into contact with it. This also comes with an immense risk, as the creatures that lie dormant in the abyss will also target the Damnation user. So it's really something that should only be used as a last resort weapon, and can only be used if someone is highly skilled in order to try to survive using it. The third code type is aura codes, and this is less of a combat thing. These in the world, these are more known as the peace codes or the passive codes. Aura code users are known for their non-violent nature, and their passiveness, but this is typically regarded as a misnomer. Aura codes allow a user to exert a force of will on their own aura. So an aura code cannot exert a physical attack on another person, and it can't really alter the world around them. This leads to the misconception that aura code users are generally peaceful people, and while this is often the case, violence and aura codes are not mutually exclusive. An aura code cannot directly be used to cause harm, but it can certainly help or indirectly cause harm. The first aura code, and I've mentioned this character in the past, this is a character named Bloodstorm has this code. It's called Slip Space. It's often confused in its iterations with Speed, but they're not the same thing. In fact, they're kind of the opposite thing in terms of how they work. Where Godspeed uses force of will and skin enhancement to sort of move at an extreme speed, Slip Space alters how a person's aura and their body interacts with the atoms around them, and essentially makes them fall horizontally to where they're trying to go. The reason why Bloodstorm is known as the Naked Knight, however, is that Slip Space's activation requirement is that if the user is using overly dense armor, then the armor will inhibit their aura, as it will sort of pass through their aura and will interact with the atoms around them and cause them to slow down in their speed. So Bloodstorm he wears a very thick set of armor, and he basically has to take it all off if he wants to use Slip Space. The other two that I'll cover really quickly are Malice and Benevolence. These ones, I think, speak for themselves. They're pretty self-explanatory. Malice creates an aura of malice around the user's body and can create effects of fear and intimidation. And Benevolence has the opposite effect. It makes someone seem more peaceful and can be used for convincing someone or seducing someone. Malice's activation requirement is that the target must be physically weaker than the opponent, and Benevolence is the opposite. Their target must be physically stronger than the aura user. The last of the traditionally magic code types is the summoner codes. They're vastly considered in Eldry to be the least understood code. They're shrouded in mystery, and they're the most recently to have appeared. They're only appearing in the last century. Summoners manifest their will in the form of specific objects, but unlike control users, they sort of create their objects that they control. They can't manipulate any object that are already in the world. They have to create their weapons. So the most common forms of these are either beast summons or weapon summons, in which case a person will summon a creature to aid them, or a weapon. There are more crazy examples, though, similar to the power codes. One of them is Malignant Armada, in which the user summons an army of ghostly soldiers. The soldiers are not invincible, but they won't go down without a fight either. Malignant Armada has a very specific activation requirement, however, and that's that the Armada is made up with the souls of the people that the user has killed in the past, whether directly or indirectly. The soldier can't be made aware of the fact that they were killed or by the user, and they can't betray the user. And they have to follow their will absolutely, but a user can't manifest more soldiers than people they've killed. And the other one is Golden Eclipse. This one happens similarly to Chimera Crimson happening on a full moon. Golden Eclipse can, as the name suggests, only happen on a solar eclipse. The user. Oh fuck! Have I not been coming through?
No, you've been coming through. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just that I think Alex had something to say.
Okay. Sorry, I wanted to jump in on that because you said like people they've killed directly or indirectly.
Yes. That's if a leader of a country, say, orders his soldiers to attack a certain other country, then the people who are killed during that attack will count. I guess would be the word. They would count as that as people killed by the Armada user.
I'm trying to imagine a situation where you don't realize that you're responsible for someone's death, and then you use this ability, and you're just like, "Oh fuck, that's a lot more people than I was expecting."
That's one way of looking at it.
Indirectly might be the wrong word to use then, because it would have to be someone that the user would have at least some level of awareness that they were responsible for killing. It can't be I'm trying to think, if it's literally indirectly, if you I can't if you got into a car accident and you unknowingly killed someone and you had no idea that wouldn't count. But if you're a genocidal leader, then the people who were killed in that genocide would be considered. That's what I more meant by indirectly.
So it's not accounting for manslaughter.
Okay, that makes
basically.
more sense.
Yeah, it doesn't account for manslaughter, but it's basically either by your hand or by your word.
Okay.
They were killed.
All right.
Interesting.
And I was where was I with Golden Eclipse? I'll just start over.
Yeah.
Golden Eclipse is similar to Chimera Crimson in that it can only be summoned during a celestial event, in this case being solar eclipses. This allows the user to summon a pocket dimension, which is known as the Golden Eclipse. Instead of the moon blocking out the sun, there's a massive golden celestial object that's constructed entirely of weapons, and during the eclipse, the user can summon any weapon from the planet. But once the eclipse passes, those objects will fade from existence. And
that sounds awesome.
Yeah, that's neat.
It's like an infinite artillery. Or something.
But only during the eclipse.
Yeah.
Golden Eclipse is a unique code in that it's passed down as it's a hereditary code.
Mm-hmm.
Each generation passes their weapons onto the eclipse. Nobody knows how old the celestial object is, but they know that it contains weapons from the last millennia, but not before.
That's so cool.
That is super cool.
Thanks. Those are the four traditional codes. There are three others that are a little bit wacky. The first type is the most similar and easy to understand. It's Relic Codes. These are probably pretty self-explanatory. It's basically just codes relating to an enchanted object. Instead of a person's will manifesting in an ability, their code will manifest in an object, and it's either an object that they have possession of, or if not, it's something they will become fervently obsessed with finding and obtaining and relics often contain a very specific power relating to whatever the original user was. I forgot to write this one down, but there's a couple examples that I have in mind. The first one being the Fox Mask code. This is it's sort of shape-shifting. It's not really shape-shifting. It's more like an illusion. Essentially, if the user puts on their Fox Mask, then they don't really shapeshift, but as far as everyone else will be concerned, they will look exactly like a completely different person. They'll look like whoever the user wants the Fosk masks to make them look like. The activation requirements being that they have to know, similar to Chimera Crimson, they have to know this person's name, they have to know their date of birth, and they have to know what they look like and what they sound like. If they can't sort of visualize those things in their heads, then they can't visualize an illusion for other people to see. And any code user that has like sort of psycho telepath be able to see through this illusion, since it's not strictly speaking shape-shifting. And the other one is a sword called the Butterfly, and the Butterfly is basically a self-healing sword that repair, like it can repair itself, and you can break it, and like after, if you wait long enough, it'll sort of go through a metamorphosis and be perfect again. It's sort of like a self-repairing sword. So there's nothing like too crazy in the relic codes. They're more like specific objects that are very personal to the user, and the user usually has like some strong, either a traumatic or an important memory tied to that object.
Mm-hmm.
The second weird code is the blood code. I'm gonna have to go into some lore here. Forgive me. So blood codes are entirely unique to vampires in this universe. They can't be manifested in humans. On the flip side, vampires can't use any of the other 6 form of code. But blood codes are totally unique to vampires. They're vampires because their vampires will have a blood code at birth instead of the other codes, which have to be manifested either over time or through a specific event in the user's life that triggers it. Vampires have a form of code from birth. This is I'll explain vampires real quick. So basically, in the northmost side of the planet, there's a country called Titania, which is basically a frozen hell. And when people came to Titania during a war a millennia ago that ravaged the planet, they found refuge here, but the climate was impossibly cold and the environment was extremely hostile, which led to constant death and suffering in the country. Over time, those who managed to survive evolved to develop certain abilities that would counter the hostile environment and the hostile animals of Titania, which in this world are the characteristics of vampirism. So the most predominant one being blood. They can sort of augment the heat of their own blood to survive even without clothing and freezing cold temperatures, and the other one being blood augmentation, which allows them to consume, since any food that they couldn't grow any food here, and most animals that they hunted couldn't really cook them, and they could barely even eat them, because once they killed an animal, the animal's body would just freeze too quickly for them to really eat it. So the only nutrition they could even get a hold of was by consuming animal blood. And over time, this manifested into blood augmentation, which transforms consumed blood into nutrition for the user's body. Over time, this transformed into a couple more like combative abilities. The first one being Iron Blood, which is very common amongst modern day vampire infantry, which allows the user to manipulate the iron in their blood to form objects, usually weapons or armor. So they might slash some of their skin and like a sword will come out of their arm or something like that.
I love that type of blood magic.
That's badass.
It's so cool. Honestly, I'm living for this vampire lore. I love unique vampire lore.
I agree.
The vampire stuff, I geek out over Titania. They're my favorite thing to write. They're basically this. The rest of the world is like sort of this cyberpunky world, but then Titania is this like frozen steampunk nation of vampires.
Oh my god, that's awesome.
Top tier
Yeah, they're
content.
great. They're also communists, so I have a natural.
I'm sold like 1000%.
Call me steampunk frozen vampires.
Out of context clips.
The other one I have is is a bone augmentation. So there are some vampires in Titania who aren't called vampires, they're called silk ravens. And instead of blood, they fed off of animal bones. They consume bone marrow. So instead of evolving blood-related abilities, they evolved sort of bone-related abilities. Instead of consuming blood to survive, they usually consume bones to survive. And as the extension of this, they can't form their blood into weapons, but they can turn their bones into sort of exoskeletal armor, or just create huge bone swords out of their arms instead.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
man, that makes for some amazing imagery.
yeah, the vampires are honestly my favorite part of this series to write. I've like snuck them into the plot of every one of the books just because I will take any excuse to include them.
Yeah.
I don't blame you. They sound super cool.
Oh yeah.
They have a wild religion too. I don't want to get into that because we have a Gods and Myths episode planned. I keep saying that. I don't know why I keep saying that. Y'all know that. But they have an interesting lore, so I'll get into that later. But the 7th type of code is in the world of Night Reaver. It's not considered a code at all by most people. This is the Devil codes. So again, unlike traditional codes, these do not manifest naturally, and unlike blood codes, these don't even manifest at birth. Basically, in order to get a devil code, you have to make a contract with a devil, a demonic spirit of some kind. You have to do something for the spirit, and in turn the spirit will lend you their power. They're like power codes, they're totally unique to the user, and they can be replicated until the current user's death, at which point the devil can either fuck off or make a contract with another user. There aren't like specific activation requirements for devil codes, but they come with an immense risk, being that if a devil user fails to complete their end of the contract, the devil will either retreat from the user, that's the best case scenario, they'll kill the user, or they'll take over the user's body permanently and possess them and live as them for the rest of their life, while the user's sort of forced into a blank space in their brain to watch their disembodied body live the rest of their life.
Always a good time.
Yeah.
I didn't write down any specific devil codes because I couldn't think of any that I know I have them, but I couldn't think of any like really juicy ones. A lot of them are more just like you'll summon the strength of a demon or the body of a demon. But the two that I have are the titular Night Reaver and Ayakith. So the Night Reaver essentially swaps parts of their body with the body parts of the demons. So like if they can manifest their hand, they can manifest a devil's hand over top of their own hand and sort of use whatever the devil's hand would be able to do, or they can use a devil's eyes, or they can manifest a skin over their own skin to be durable, but like in its earliest form, without properly training, they can only do one of these things at a time. They can't do a catch-all full body devil. And Ayakith can't manifest the strength of a devil, but it can manifest the mind of a devil. It essentially Freaky Fridays the user with the brain of the devil for an hour, while the devil can basically go fucking berserk on whatever the user wants to be dead. They can basically just, okay, I'm going to go to sleep, make sure whatever is in front of me is not moving by the time I wake up, and then that's usually what happens.
Oh, that's fun.
Damn. Letting a devil into your body, Jesus.
Yeah, the devils, and also unlike most of the other codes, devils like often interact with their person. This is why I was saying I sort of accidentally created JoJo stands, because the devils sort of have personalities of their own, and they appear around the user, and they can other code users can usually see the devil, their devil. So it's not exactly like a stand, but it's kind of like a stand. So those are all the codes. There's a couple of other things I want to get into before I've said my piece. Which is the first being Rens. Rens are a derogatory term in this world. As I said earlier, magic is not exactly like a rare thing in this world. Pretty much everyone has access to one code or another, and Ren is a term that's short for renouncer, which is someone who has figuratively, not intentionally, renounced code usage and can't use magic of any kind. They're usually considered like lesser creatures than everyone else, and as I mentioned in the last podcast, the protagonist is one of them. So they got that going for them. And the other thing I wanted to get into was the three families, the three predominant magic families in this world, because getting into them might explain like how magic interacts with this world. So the three main ones are the Whiteward family, the Clover family, but with a K, and the Hornraven family. The Whiteward family are considered the most like the more traditional, the more modern, I guess, magic family. Most of their users are very varied. Some of them possess control codes and aura codes. Some of them possess aura codes and summoner codes. They're pretty powerful. They're very well trained, and they consider themselves like very scholarly and academic. The Hornraven families are more of your classic gothic witches, and they have like
content.
They have they usually only have one or two codes, but what makes the Hornraven family unique is that whoever is the heir to Hornraven possesses the aforementioned Golden Eclipse. That's their trump card. And the Clover family are this insane ultra traditionalist religious family. I forgot to mention this earlier. Codes aren't like a superpower. You can have codes in multiple branches. Like usually people with summoner codes or aura codes or power codes can possess other forms, and usually devil code users have one other code. Code transference is not like totally unheard of, but usually the trick is that mundane code users only have access to one very small code. More advanced code users might have a more advanced version of one code or two mundane codes, and master code users can have up to 2 or 3 codes. But what makes the Clover family weird is that they're master code users, but they each only have one code, and essentially they're like each member of the Clover family is like put through rigorous, what is essentially torture from birth in order to manifest the most powerful form of one very specific code.
Gotta love those cults.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
So is that the run through of your magic system?
That's it, yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, if you don't mind, I've got a few, I guess, follow-ups on all of it.
Okay.
I guess like the most important thing, like between 7 different systems, basically, like how has it been like trying to balance all of that?
Well, it honestly hasn't been that crazy because I sort of built the magic system around certain abilities that I knew I wanted characters to have. I knew, like for example, the main character is the Night Reaver, and I knew that her Lancer would have the butterfly sword. So those are just examples of like, those are 2 magic things that I knew I wanted to be in this story, and then I sort of built a magic system around catering to like the specific types of the specific codes that I knew I wanted. Like, so that hasn't actually been that difficult, sort of balancing it and like making it. And I feel like with making it that like control codes are the sort of the common mundane code, power codes are this very specific, usually used by villains or like strong military types. And aura codes are like peaceful, blood codes are vampires, summoner codes are the more like traditionally magic, and devil codes are devil codes. They're like the MacGuffin of the universe.
God, gotta love MacGuffins.
Gotta love a good McMuffin. They're not really MacGuffins because no one's like after them or chasing them, but like they're an important part in the literal story.
thought you were gonna say they're an important part of they're an important part of people's breakfast.
They're an important part of this breakfast.
You're like, you can't start your day without a good MacGuffin. Oh my god, I'm so stupid. I'm sorry. Anyway,
It's totally fine.
yeah. So on top of balancing it, like, just how long really have you been trying to like work at this? Because I imagine like it, I imagine like you didn't like perfectly master balancing everything within like a year. Like, surely you've been working on this for a while.
I've been working on this series since high school, and I have had like general ideas since high school, and I've sort of been working to refine it over the last year. But I definitely did not come up with the system and all of this shit, and then like work it out over the last year. It's been like a much longer process.
Yeah. Any initial inspirations or?
Well, I mentioned stands a couple times, and stands are like they're a bit of an inspiration, especially for the power codes. They're like I think it just appealed to me, the idea of like magic not really manifesting as like as I have nothing against spells. I'm not going to rant, but I think I liked the idea of like magic manifesting as a person's will, not necessarily like something they had to learn, but sort of an extension of themselves that they would just naturally have. It just appealed to me, so I think that sort of I latched onto that.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
So I guess really my final question is, like, since you started in high school and since you've been working like through it still, or at least try and find the time to, like, what have you really learned anything since first developing it and still working on it now?
Well, I've definitely learned to create like limitations on it, because originally my magic system was a lot softer. It was a lot more of like a soft magic system, and people just had magic willy-nilly. And I think as I sort of engaged with like a lot of more fantasy stuff than like just Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter as I grew up, I sort of came to the realization that like interesting magic systems can't just be like, yeah, bro, it's a fantasy world. Magic exists in the fantasy world, bro. Like you have to develop it, and you have to think about it, and like create. You can't just rely on the generally understood notion that someone can wave their hands and something will happen. You have to like
Yeah.
you have to develop some of that stuff. So I think that's sort of why that's also why I was like working on this over summer of 2018. Thought I would have it done and like the first book done by now, but then I put it all on hold because I realized my magic system was dog shit back then. So
at this point, like, I guess like I'll touch on my magic system in a second, but like it generally does seem that your magic system is basically its own character at this point, or it's its own like influential piece of the story, which honestly it should be. Like, I'm not gonna touch on like, I'm not gonna like start shitting on other magic systems, but I said before in the beginning, like, the second that you're able to write your characters out of any situation using magic, it's a bad story.
Yeah, and that was something I definitely wanted to avoid. And as I was creating this magic system, I wanted to make sure like I didn't want to have a magic system. The first thing I was like I don't want to have a magic system where people would like obviously have access to magic, healing magic, because that's something that's always sort of peeved me in a lot of fantasy. Is like when I know a lot of fantasy settings, I know that healing magic exists, and characters just won't use it for no reason, and it'll piss me off. Or like during dire situations, I'll just be like, yeah, bro, I know that you can just magically graft a dude's skin together using magic in this world. It's not. So I wanted to create a magic system where like you had people who had healing magic, but like you wouldn't have a situation where, say, like you had a combat situation and healing users would be traditionally available, because most people in a combat situation are not like the passive type and probably wouldn't have developed a healing code. They've developed more combative codes in that time. So that was sort of the system generated from my will to not have like get out of jail cards for the protagonists.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing, Gabe. That took up a lot of time, but I loved listening to every part of it.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's really,
jeez, yeah, I've been talking for an
really-
hour. I didn't even realize.
Almost an hour, yeah.
yeah, it's really in depth though.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You all thought you were gonna save me for last.
Just watch, she'll sum it up in 2 sentences and we'll be looking like massive idiots. Anyway, I guess we'll go on to mine then. So my magic system for Xeno basically can be broken down within only 5 schools of magic. I've put it onto the Discord, but I'll quickly switch over to our display. So this is pretty much it. It is revolving around 5 elemental systems: fire, soil or earth, water, air, lightning. So it's pretty much the 4 Aristotelian elements plus lightning. And you have some stuff, or then you have combinations in between, but basically they each have names. So fire in my world is called, or is addressed as the Guinness. Earth is addressed as Gaia. Water is addressed as Mare. Air is addressed as Sali, and Zerot is addressed as lightning. There are the 5. So the 5 ones in between are what I've called the fuses. So basically, if you were to combine fire and lightning, or fire and earth, or water and air, you each get a given one. So there's if you combine fire and earth, then it's magma. If you combine soil and plants, it's water. If you combine water and air, it's ice. Air and lightning is power, and lightning and fire is combustion. And if you're kind of, for those listening, if it kind of sounds familiar, yes, it is pretty much just the Avatar system. I'm sorry. But
I have a question.
What's up?
Just based on looking at this, is it only possible to combine the 2, or fuse the 2 that are beside each other? Like you couldn't try and do like fire and air or lightning and soil?
See, that's a good question because I haven't thought that far ahead yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
So
was just wondering.
yeah, so it is possible to like cross fuse. I just haven't come up with those ones yet. It's basically all just going in a clockwise direction starting from fire. So I guess just those are just because, so everything that I've addressed so far is just the elements that I've introduced into my story so far. Everything else I'll be fleshing out in future installments basically. So the 5 fuses also have their own unique names. So for the fuse between the Guinness and Gaia, which is fire and earth, it is Aval, which is just lava backwards. For Gaia and Mare, so water and earth, it is Taline, which is Ptaelan. So basically the P in the beginning is silent, so it's just Taline. The fuse between Mare and Sali, so water and air, is called Frilsi. I'm trying to roll the R, but I can't do Frilsi. Something fancy like that, but yeah, it's Frilsi. Imperium is the fuse between air and lightning, and Praemi is the fuse between lightning and fire. So to quickly go over the fuses real quick, because the primary schools of magic kind of explain themselves already. Lava is pretty self-explanatory. Taline is dealing with things plants, or is dealing with all things plants. So like you are able to control plant life. You're able to destroy plant life if need be. Ice is Rilsi, which is also pretty self-explanatory. But the ones that I wanted to explain were Imperium and Praemi. So that is the fire, air, and lightning ones. Imperium basically deals with electricity. And so in the current world that I've set in, electricity is is the fuse between lightning and air. So, houses are powered by Imperium magic. Cars are powered by Imperium magic. And generally, it's a very stable kind of electricity. It isn't used to harm anyone at all, but therein lies Praemi, which is the combination between lightning and fire, which is used to harm people. Praemi is very destructive. It is it can be used to basically blow shit up. And even though it says combustion here on the diagram, it's not, that is in no way related to combustion meant from Avatar, because, you know, comparisons and shit. On top of these, though, so this is everything that I have so far, but I also have 2 other magic systems, which I can elaborate a little bit more in our Gods and Myths episode. But there is the Mystana, so Mystana, which is the magic system of the gods. And then there is the Amara, which is the magic system of demons, basically. I've elaborated enough on everything with the Mystana. I'm still working a few kinks out, but basically in my story, I'm fleshing out as much details as possible. But with Amara, it really shows that's how underdeveloped I've put it, because that's not even the real name for it. I've kind of just, you know, relating to supernatural, which is a weird segue, but you know, Amara is has been called the darkness in Supernatural, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice. And I always like the name Amara anyway, so
It's a beautiful name. One of my favorites.
Yeah, so those are the primary. So the primary magic system, or the primary magic schools, are the 5. There are the fuses, and actually, I don't think I touched on this, but basically, the 5 schools are called Arcanics. So Arcanic magic is the magic system of my continent. Basically, it's across every single continent, and each race has either a proficiency in one of them or has to learn from the ground up. And I'll elaborate more on that in future books when I eventually get to it. But basically, yeah, the Arcanic magic system is prevalent across all the continents, or each one abides by a power level. So I've called that a Palum, Palum. Palum levels only really stretch between 4 different masteries. So when you're first learning magic, you start off as a novice, which is color-coded by cerulean. So basically, when you're learning spells, everything that you cast, be it, you know, lightning, fire, air, water, earth, whatever, it's almost all in cerulean. So everything almost looks cerulean. So you have cerulean flames, cerulean lightning bolts. I guess like cerulean. I haven't really worked out for air yet, because I don't know how that would look. But basically, yeah. So everything is.
I love this. Color-coded magic is right up my alley.
Yeah. So with that, as you progress through as a student of magic, and I'll get to the background lore of all of that in a second, your Palum changes. So as a novice, you are color-coded as cerulean, but when you move into the, I guess, intermediate power level, so that's, I think, let me refer to my document. So I guess, yeah, so once you progress outside of a novice, then you're becoming an intermediate student, and then your Palum changes to gold. Once you've progressed out of that, then your Palum level changes to crimson, which is your master, and it really takes dedication to get to the final one, which is disciple, which is white. But as a bit of a interest into my story, there may be a 5th Palum level, which is black.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I'll get to that. Yeah.
Colors? How did you choose like which colors applied to which level? Out of curiosity.
I think I don't remember where exactly I originated that kind of color system, but I don't know, for some reason, like I always associated blue as like the beginning level, and then once you get to yellow and then red, it just kind of goes up from there. I always thought like red was kind of like the master level, and then white was like you kind of know everything. And I think that's mainly because of like the primary colors. Basically, I wanted to keep it simple for myself, because I had never had such an in-depth magic system before, so I guess maybe that's why.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I was just curious if there was like a reason behind it.
I'm sure there is. I just can't remember. But yeah, so that's not to say that like anyone really can cast these. You do need a specific item to kind of cast the magic. And unfortunately I don't have it here, but basically they're called conduits. So if you have access to a conduit, then you're able to cast magic, or then you're able to cast the given magic that you're provided. So each of the 5 Arcanics, so I guess I'll go back to the diagram. So each of the 5 Arcanics has a given item or a conduit that allows people to cast it. So with the Guinness fire, it is a bag of ash, or generally it's ash. When your Palum or your novice Palum begins with cerulean ash, and as you progress, people or your ash will correspond. So basically, instead, when you're a master and your Palum is given, and your Palum is red, then you're given red ash. For Gaia Earth, because it is very in tune with Avatar, you are wearing sandals. So novices wear novices wear cerulean sandals. Intermediate casters wear gold sandals, and then master level casters of Gaia will wear red sandals or crimson sandals. For Mare Water, it is I think is a pouch of water, which is similar to what Katara wore in Avatar. So I think it's basic. Yeah. So it's basically it. Like so watercasters basically have a water pouch with a corresponding, which corresponds their color. So like if they're novices, it's a cerulean pouch, or if they're masters, it's a crimson pouch. For air, so for Saily casters, so I guess air casters, they have tattooed arrows on their hand. So also keeping in touch with Avatar. However, it's tattooed blank with blank ink, and it almost always starts off blue, but as you progress through Saily magic, you don't ever have to get it re-tattooed. It basically just changes with the color of your Palum level. Lightning is a ring that basically you would strike like a match to activate or to generate to generate the lightning from within the ring. I haven't worked so far on how to recharge all of these things, but basically, yeah. So for every Palum, or for every of the primary Arcanics, there is a conduit needed to cast it. Before I get into like my interesting deliverable basically for this conversation, I wanted to quickly touch on the other two magic systems. So the magic system of the gods and the magic system of the actually no, I think I'm getting too ahead of myself. So
before you do, can I ask one more question?
What's up?
For the Palums, was that the word?
Mm-hmm.
How is that like decided? Does it just like happen, or do you have like a teacher who's like, you've advanced so well, you can move up?
I'll get to that later.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but basically, I want to draw attention to the diagrams that I put up onto the chat. So two of them are listed as Adenian hexes, and the others are Adenian characters. I've since changed the names of Adenian to Orde, so O-R-D, or O-R-D-E. So they would be now Orde hexes and Orde characters. Basically, this is the language system that was written by a first age wizard, Adena Darrow. And again, this ties into the lore of the lores of the magic system. Basically, the hexes are basically enchantments that only disciples really can cast. So it's the people who have pretty much like completely mastered and understood their respective magic system. So it's only them that can cast it. And the thing is about hexes, they can be enchanted on pretty much anyone, but that doesn't mean they're permanent. They can be destroyed. And it's since been, I've since kind of changed things around basically. But if you look at each one, I have 4 right now. So there's the Guardian's Hex, the Illiterate's Hex, the Quake's Hex, and the Gauze Hex. The Guardian's Hex basically means that the user is invulnerable to magic to an extent. The Illiterate's Hex suppresses magic within a given area, but that I think I've completely forgotten about, so I've reworked it differently into the story. The Quake's Hex is kinetic redistribution. So basically that just means that, you can... I think what that means when I wrote it is basically the redistribution of energy. So whenever I guess if someone strikes you with magic, you're able to redistribute that instead, right? So it's basically I guess if you guys remember from Black Panther how his suit could absorb energy and he could redistribute that by slamming or by activating it.
Yeah, so it's like parkour.
Yeah, so basically that's what the Quake's Hex does. I haven't written it into the story yet, but I plan to at some point. And the Gauze Hex is instant healing. And each one kind of has their own caveat. So basically, I was trying to explain earlier with the Guardian's Hex, that means you're invulnerable to magic to an extent. So basically that means you're invulnerable to a certain number of shots, basically, or you're invulnerable to a certain amount of magical attacks before suddenly the hex goes away. It varies depending on power level. So basically, between 2 novices, they're able to withstand maybe 3-4 respective shots from each other. But then suddenly, if you are a disciple or if you're a novice attacking a disciple, it'll take much longer for their hex to go away. Same thing with gauzes, or with the Gauze Hex and the Quake Hex. There's certainly a lot of different. I'm still trying to figure out the balancing for that, but aside from that, there's also the Orde character, so the thing just below it. That is nothing really special. It's more or less just an alphabet of language, or it's more or less just the alphabet for writing out the respective magic systems. And one other thing, actually, I have it kind of on a tilt right now, but basically, it is 6 different hands casting, or kind of as a diagram for casting each respective Arcanic. I originally was going to note it for just one specific one, but I think it'll apply to pretty much everyone, or to every one of the 5. So you have the Adtonic, which is a magical attack. Medela, it is a shield, or it is a healing spell. Mastigo, it is a magical whip. If I'm remembering correctly, I'm a bit out of date with these things. Because I drew all of this in 2018, so I'm trying to remember. So the Mastigo is a magical whip given whatever Arcanic, so you can cast fire whips, cast water whips, whatever. Arma is a shield. Venta pushes back with a given magic attack, or with a given Arcanic, so like a firewall, a air wall, or whatever. And the Mattis? I've forgotten what that one was, so I'm just going to completely ignore that. So that's a very basic rundown of everything that I have so far, but in context of everything, there's a lot, I guess, contextually, it'll all hopefully start making sense when I go back, or when I go into the background lore of everything. So, the 5 Arcanic schools of magic were discovered by 5 different individuals within the first century, basically, of my time, or of my world. back when it was still, very medieval, very fantasy heavy, and there wasn't a lot of technology. The first few disciples were the people who mastered all 5 and have respectively passed down that knowledge from generation to generation in what is called Ascension Summit, which is on a map of Illyria, which is where my story is taking place. It is in the northernmost part of the continent. People would go there, or people who ever wanted to learn Arcanic spellcasting had to go through 2 different trials. They had to win the favor of the current disciples, as well as passing the Gratiss tests. So the Gratiss test, Gratiss, there were a series of tests that kind of delved into all 5 schools of magic and some of the fuses. Whoever passed the test was given their choice of mastering 1. So basically, if the Gratiss tests were introducing everyone to the magic system, so graduating those tests and passing those tests meant that you could now master water spells. You could now master lightning spells. You could master fire spells, whatever. In the current story, there is my main character Porter, who passed the Gratiss tests very young, and she chose the Zerot, so lightning, as her Arcanic, which means that as of the story, she is an intermediate caster. And actually, I'd like to read that happening.
Ooh.
So I'm taking a section from my book, and basically I'm going to be doing that for all of the magic systems. So bear with me, but yeah. So the Zerot is by far the magic system that I've developed the most, because it ties very heavily into Porter's story, as well as the story of, it just ties really well into Porter's story in general. And it goes like this. So just for some context, Porter is basically cleaning herself up in a washroom, and she is recalling a memory. She's recalling a memory during it. So peeking from her white cotton tank top is a stretched ivory hexagon. Placing a hand close to it, the shape sparkles with a bright white light, revealing the details of the Guardian's hex seared into her skin by her mom when she was younger. On the border, 4 white pearls of equal size form, 1 at the top and the remaining 3 on the bottom. On the inside, 3 diamonds representing the head, body, and legs rest at the center of an alabaster disc. In between the disc and diamonds is the word Guardian written in the Orde tones. An ancient set of symbols made of vertical dashes and dots written by Cordero, Belcher from the First Age and the founder of Vuhin's 5th school of magic, the Zerot. Porter called it Darrow's lightning growing up to make it easier to remember. Porter's head floods with memories. Her mom wasn't passionate about anything else other than the lightning. Porter was 6 when she first learned about the 5th Arcanic. Her mom rattled on about the lightning for hours, her eyes always widening and flaring with almost juvenile excitement. She'd mimic the lightning sparking and hissing for her daughter's amusement, and if Porter wasn't paying attention, her mom slammed her hands together, creating a vicious clap of thunder to scare her back to reality. Porter always wondered if her mom did this with her students at the university. So, for context, her mother, Eureli Zeno, is a professor at the Illyrian University of Foundation of Arcanic Magic. So she teaches basically Arcanic magic. She is, she's like, I don't want to say she's like Snape. She's more like Dumbledore, but anyway. After passing the Gratiss Arcanic tests and becoming a graduate at 12 years old, the youngest to pass in Illyria's history, Porter chose the lightning as her Arcanic, allowing her to learn and cast the 9 spells associated with the school. Hour-long drives to the university after midnight happened every other week, where she practiced inside one of the IUF's Arcanic training rooms. The first time she ever casted an Adtono bolt, a cerulean bolt of pure electricity, her hand wasn't in the right position to control it. The bolt ricocheted across the room, nearly destroying all the equipment in the training room and almost paralyzing her mom as she tried to stop it. Porter expected immediate backlash, but her mom was patient, encouraging. She wanted Porter to experience the full potential of the lightning, to fall for its wonder as much as she did. Okay, so with every spell Porter learned, she was treated to a unique care package as a reward. Most days, it was a small box of chocolate-coated strawberries. When she mastered a spell, she'd get a new collection of Mist comics. And when her Palum changed to yellow, reflecting her mastery of all 9 spells at once, the reward was up to Porter's imagination, but her mom's budget. So that is basically the background on the relationship between the Zerot and Porter. Any initial thoughts before I go on? Because this is part of my book. I'd love to know what you guys think.
Yeah, it just sounds really cool.
Yeah, I like the I like the stuff going on with the mom character.
Cool. So, like on top of this, like I've really tried to work in as much, not just of the Zerot, but obviously of the other 5, or of the other magic systems. So I'll get to those in a second. But basically, one other example of showing the Zerot in action is during an action scene. So I'll read this in the context. This scene is happening when Porter has run into some of the bad guys. So Porter swivels on her heels, striking her mom's ring like a match. A surge of gold lightning sparks from the engraved bolts, the power of the Arcanic rushing through both arms. She raises both fists, channeling the energy to create an armor shield. But she doesn't even blink before a black bolt of lightning hisses through the air with dangerous speed. It collides with the armor just as it forms. The armor shatters. The recoil of the shield's destruction sends Porter across the courtyard. She slams onto a bare slab of mossy concrete a few steps shy from the temple's entrance. So, there is, me trying to show off like different power dynamics. So obviously, as an intermediate caster, Porter is able to, channel magic through both hands, whereas if you're only a novice, you're only able to cast through the one hand, which makes it obviously half as powerful. And suddenly a black bolt of lightning. Oh no, that's never happened before. And I'll get to that in a second, but yeah. Everything else. So I also dive very briefly into some of the other ones. So relating to Guinness, fire. This small section is, I think, kind of later into the story. So when Porter and Magna have some kind of safe house for a bit. So about the Guinness, clearing her head, Porter counts 3 different brass cauldrons, each alit with bright blue and turquoise flames and positioned near the windows. So that's how the cabin's warded. Guinness flames. Smart enough plan, Porter thinks. The wards temporarily suppress all other kinds of arcanic magic casting except senates, as long as they're in place and within the same power level. Porter walks to one. She watches the smoke from the flames rise to the window, creating a small handprint on the glass, a sign the wards are active. She's only a novice. The wards won't last forever, especially if the bad guys outnumber them. And yeah, so to explain that a bit, as a novice, casting Guinness or casting wards basically means that within a given area, all other kind of magic is suppressed within that same power level. So if a novice casts a ward within 15 feet, anyone that enters within 15 feet of that as a novice cannot use their magic, except for the person who casts it. As soon as it gets into higher levels, that changes obviously. But anyway, about Gaia, so Earth. This is in context of Porter just beating up a couple of different casters relating to the enemy, but he's a belcher. His skin's a warm cream color and his eyes are upturned. Porter lifts part of the coat, grabbing a midnight blue pouch. It's half full of ash, the conduit of the Guinness, the first school of arcanic magic. He must have recently passed the Gratiss tests. Only novices carried this pouch. Dropping it, she glances over at the rockcaster. As she expected, they're wearing a pair of black open-toed sandals, the conduit of the Gaia, second school of Arcanic magic. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly round up with the other two. So this one, so with the Mare and Saley, it is within context of Porter meeting the villain. And I won't reveal who the villain is because spoilers, but Porter maintains a stern, guarded scowl as the villain approaches, smirking. A woman a few words. The villain starts to circle Porter, parting strands of their mossy brown locks to the side of their pale face. Porter spots the leather strap of a mare pack full of water, the conduit for the third school of Arcanic magic it's named after. And then, relating to the Saley, the villain keeps their arm with the mare bracelet at their side, revealing a tattooed hand. All 5 fingers bear pearl white lines stretching from the fingertips down to the wrist, serving as the conduit of the fourth school of magic, the Saley. So, those are the 5 Arcanics, and that is my basically primary magic system. The ones where it starts to get a little bit more creative is actually I've already touched on them, but before I get to that, actually, I want to touch on one other caveat, and that is a fuse called the Praemi. As I've explained earlier, it is the fuse between lightning and fire, and in this current time setting in my world, it is taken the form of weapons, specifically guns. They're called Adtonic pistols or Adtonic weapons, basically, and they combine. Well, you know what? I'll just explain it for myself. So, the Adtonic pistol character holds. Okay, this is going to be really hard to not try to spoil anything, but basically, the Adtonic pistol character held rests on the glass. One in a family of weapons born from the Praemi, the fuse of the Guinness and the Zeroth schools. The pistol's the smallest variant and is the most readily available to all of Illyria. The weapon's powered by a battery inserted into the grip, giving the holder 10 concentrated shots of novice-level Adtonables before it needs a new battery. Guess it's somewhat comforting, Porter thinks. These things can't get any stronger than novice level. So, because my current time period is set kind of at the crossroads between sci-fi and fantasy, I decided to create my own unique fantasy sci-fi weapons, and that comes in the form of these Adtonic weapons. So basically, they're basically guns, but instead of bullets, they fire concentrated shots of electricity. They're powered by a battery, so a magazine, and as soon as the battery's drained, you have to replace it with a new battery. So basically, you're just loading in a new magazine.
So they're like guns that are loaded with like magic. That's fucking so sick. Oh my god.
Thank you. So far, it's only been the pistol that I've introduced, but I'm going to roll out like a whole lineup of other weapons. So like submachine guns, assault rifle, snipers, all that kind of fun jazz. But yeah, so the caveat for this, because I've been talking about balancing, is with such a powerful weapon that pretty much anyone can use. Like you don't need you don't need to have gone through the Arcanic training you don't need to have gone through the Gratiss tests to hold these things. They're capped at novice level. So that means they definitely can kill someone, just it takes a while. Especially it'll take a while if they're going to if they're fighting against someone with a higher Palum level, basically. But with that, I guess to kind of round up the my magic system, I wanted to touch on the Mystana and the Amara. And the Amara, actually, I'll start with first because it is the one that I haven't or actually, you know what? I'll touch on the Amara last. So the Mystana is the magic system of the gods, and I've told you guys very briefly, I've told you guys this kind of briefly before, but basically, how this magic system is activated is only through either the gods themselves or the mystics, which are basically like the appointed vessels of the gods. And I'll get more into that into our Gods and Myths episode. But basically these gives it's kind of similar to what you said, Gabe, so that it is very matching. It's not a given specific power, but it's basically the like bending to the will of the given mystic or the given god at the time. So it really depends on the situation. So Mystana is kind of the umbrella term for everything that this magic system includes. And the main name that I've given the actual magic itself is Lunix. So Lunix is in terms of the story an Illyrian term for pure light. And by pure light, I guess I've meant that it's only light that the gods can see. So that means that they have complete and total mastery of said light, and likewise their mystics do. So to introduce the pivotal moment that Porter gained that light, I'm going to read out the section. So a series of tattoos coats both forearms, stretching from the tip of her elbow down to her wrists. The Lisianthus is at the center in vibrant mauve, matching the size of her palm. The core and each individual petal are detailed with small, thin leaves. Dozens of thick, jungle-like vines, decorated in the brightest purples and pinks, sprout from underneath the flower. Attached to the vines are bunches of white, serrated leaves, and in the background are clusters of black, white, and gold diamonds. Porter lifts herself up to sit, using her free hand and help from Magna to keep her balance. Wait, don't you recognize these? Magna chirps, her eyes gleaming with excitement. They're Lunix tattoos. In the Myst comics her and Magna grew up reading, the mystics had colorful, detailed tattoos just like the ones on her arms, seared into the skin using Lunix, an Illyrian term for pure light. So this is basically, how Porter is chosen as a mystic. Spoiler. And I want to read like a very pivotal moment of seeing this magic in action. And, hopefully it's a very cool moment, because if not, I have a lot of reworking to do. But yeah, so in context, Porter is in her room alone, or Porter is in her room while Magna is sleeping. And so she's basically alone. She hears a voice from the goddess of the soil, Linnea, asking to meet, and she's asked to turn her palm to the ceiling. So, with that context in mind, the tattoos brighten. Vibrant hues of mauve, black, and white, or mauve, black, white, and gold glow from Porter's arms. Her jaw drops, and the joyous thumping in her heart shakes her chest as the beautiful colors shape themselves into individual streams. They glide down to her palm, converging at the center to form a hand. With palpable elation, Porter watches as the black, white, and mauve streams of light shape the goddess's arm. The gold streams branch off, creating several bracelets, a pair of gold rings, and picture-perfect replicas of Porter's tattoos. As the rest of the body takes shape, a white cape wraps itself around the shoulders, and a white dress accented with mauve details descends to her shins. Linnea stands in front of Porter, fully formed with a smile brighter than the stars. Porter's never seen a more beautiful woman than her. So, it is very much an exclusive magic that only the gods and their mystics can use. But with the Amara, it is a lot more mysterious. There's a lot more mystery behind what this magic is, because this story is written at a time where no one really knows about it, and it is still very, very dark and disturbing. And the key scene that I wanted to highlight by me reading it, or I have two key scenes actually. So the first scene is in context, or so in within context, it is of Porter and Magna running into the bad guys. So, that sleeve of armor on his right arm hums with a strange charcoal black fog. Magic. Unknown magic. Between the 5 schools, the 5 fuses, and the Mystana, the magic of the gods, she's never seen a magic system like that. And then, skip ahead a bit, a black Palum. Those same words, it keeps repeating in her head. For good reason, Porter guesses. Only 4 Palum levels, novice, expert, master, and disciple exist in all 5 schools of Arcanic, exists in all 5 Arcanic schools of magic, but a fifth one and stronger than all 4 of them. Yeah, I think that's it. Some mystery there. But the key scene that I also wanted to highlight is, well, I'll leave you guys to the imagination because I think I might have read this before, but this is where playing around with the Amara magic really makes it interesting. So, within context, Porter and Magna have arrived at a destination that a mysterious character has suddenly introduced themselves to. So, close to 11 since leaving Amari, Porter and Magna park at the lot to the left of the restaurant. Porter exits the car first, feeling the chilling sting of the light breeze on her cheeks. She fastens the bandolier around her waist. On their way to the restaurant's entrance, Porter turns a corner before the sliding doors part as a woman storms out of 12 crows. Porter takes cover near a corner, watching the body scurry into the dense fog. She's frantic, arms raised and her steps dangerously careless, as if there's something worse to worry about. She's in danger. Deep within Porter, her inner spark flickers. She couldn't prevent her mom's abduction. She couldn't help her. But right now, she can help that woman. Get behind me, Porter says to Magna, unsheathing her left baton as they head into the fog. Porter stalks through Feste's empty streets, anticipating a possible ambush. She hears Magna unlatch Marna from her belt. It's that quiet. Every crunch of her boot against the snow rings in her ears, and the cool mist of her breath mixes into the bleak grayness around them. Porter breathes in, just as a scream thunders in the silence. It's a woman's, coming from the right. They're close to her. That was a loud scream. Porter charges forward, a death grip on both batons now. Approaching the corner of an alleyway, Porter and Magna take cover. Controlling her breathing to listen in, Porter winces. Was she hearing bones snapping? The two give a nod, charging into the alley. But they don't take another step closer. Towering over a corpse mangled beyond immediate recognition was a woman straight out of a nightmare's nightmare. Her gray, almost ash-like skin's riddled with deep black lines resembling cracks. A pair of large bat wings, amber and black in hue, protrude from her back, masking parts of the woman's face. A horrified chill runs down Porter's spine. Porter could barely finish before the woman snaps her head to face them. A pair of long, curling ram horns stick out from her forehead, piercing through the oily black bangs hanging from her head. A dark liquid, most likely blood, drips from the pair of exposed canines and shark-like teeth. The black cracks crease through her face like a terrifying mosaic piece. But it's the woman's eyes. Porter murmurs the name. Senate. Senate stares back, her eyes a bright golden autumn. You. So, in that scene, it's displaying just a little bit of how dangerous and how mysterious Amara magic is. And while it's all still so much for me to, I guess, initially kind of wrangle, like, I've been having a lot of fun trying to develop this, and certainly, like, holding myself to the 12 rules of magic that I had stated very early on in the episode. Like, it is very interesting, not just trying to obviously make every shot count, basically, but trying to make sure it doesn't take control of the story.
Yeah.
But, yeah, any comments on my magic system, guys?
God damn, you've written a lot more than I have.
Yeah, it's surprising.
I
Yeah.
like how it seems like I was gonna ask about balance before, but I think you sort of answered that. I like how like it seems like magic and the environment and the sort of the gods and like the deeper lore seems to like sort of interact and flow between one another throughout the story. I mean that those might be like examples for the sake of just explaining the magic, but it really seems like they sort of flow between the subjects very like really well. So I was gonna ask about balance, but it seems like that's been answered.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, it's
Just to clarify,
what's up?
you said you would get to this later, so it just people just like once they master their spells, that's when they like level up between the Palums.
Yeah. So when you're a novice, you have to master, or you have to basically learn all 9 spells to advance to expert. So that means you go from blue to yellow. If you want to go from yellow to red, you have to master all 9 of them. So you have to have ultimate control over like all 4 of them, and that basically leads you to master. So that means you're good. You're basically set. You know all 9 spells and you know how to cast them properly. And I didn't mention this, but basically, with the exception of the Adtonic weapons, it's only thing you can only start fusing spells when you've at least reached yellow.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Just so, you don't start, or like, just so in my world, it's not like, there's a lot of like control here, I'm hoping, because at a time there can only be 5 disciples. Or there can only be 5 disciples, 1 per Arcanic. And I don't think I mentioned that too, actually, but yeah, so there's only 5 per one, and Porter's mom just happens to be the disciple for lightning, which I think is a thing, which like I didn't want to just introduce the whole story and like write the magic system around it, but like one of the key things that I wanted to do, especially in relating to the 12 rules that I spoke about earlier, was really integrate it into the story. So I always knew Porter's mom had a very high role into the whole thing, but now she definitely has a higher one. And moving forward, like I'm very excited to expand on that even more because shit happens. Oh, that's all I'll say.
I mean, I sure hope so. If you have how many stories planned for this again?
14.
14, he says.
Yeah, it's ambitious. So basically, I can expand on that later actually, but yeah, any other things you guys want to comment on, or?
I mean, it's pretty cool in general.
Yeah, I love the Alex already mentioned this, but I do really like the color coded magic, and I like how like it's the the training seems to work, and how like how that stuff seems to work. A lot training and magic learning can be difficult to sort of implement in a story. I feel like I don't want to call any writers that specifically because like unless like they're problematic, I don't like to slag on other writers, but I feel like you've really done a solid job of like implementing like a tier system and like a sort of like magical uh education, not an education, like a magical like levels, I guess, into this world.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, school and like the Magic University and the Ascension Summit and all that stuff aside, like, yeah, the color coding thing and like sticking to the 4 Aristotelian elements was pretty much just for me because I didn't exactly build a good, or I haven't really built a magic system of that kind ever. So as a way, it was kind of something easy for me to start off with. But then like eventually when I was more comfortable, I added in the fuses. I gave names to all of them basically. And yeah, let's get to our main event. And I said that in a previous episode, but like, yeah, like for those listening, like you all know how comprehensive and multiversey Alex's stuff is, so let's get straight into that.
Ironically, Katariana's magic system is probably my most boring one. And I probably could have chosen a more interesting one to talk about. But we're here, so let's stick to it.
That's the spirit.
The magic in Katariana is very much based on like maybe I should say it this the other way. Like the races in Katariana are kind of based on the type of magic they have.
Mm-hmm.
And that like that's one of the ways that you can differentiate between them. Besides, like physicality and stuff, but the magic's like definitely a big part of it. So I'm just gonna start at the top.
All right, I'll pull up the diagram.
This fancy diagram that I drew hastily a couple of hours ago before we started recording. So we're gonna start in the top corner, the celestial corner. You can see there's two symbols in there. The first one in gold is the symbol of the Arun, or the like angelic celestial star-eating beings that exist in my world. And then the one beside it in black is the symbol of the Drar, which are sort of the demons. It's not really good ways to explain them because they're more like giant eldritch beings than they are like angels and demons. But that's how they started out. So that's why they're like, that's hence the color scheme of gold and black. And so because they're like vaguely eldritch beings, their magic is probably like the most complicated and like incomprehensible of the bunch. Both of them, they're not like the same race, but they're very similar, and they have like a symbiotic relationship almost. But like basically their main ability is they have control over light. So they can manipulate light in different ways in order to affect their physical being. Like they're technically beings made out of, in the case of the Arun specifically, they're beings made out of like pure light. But they can like control how bright the light is so that, they can be looked at by people with sensitive eyeballs. But they can also make themselves look brighter, so they look like a star like out in the sky. They can also like manipulate light to make them look like give themselves a glamour, basically, like illusion themselves into looking basically however they want. And then they could also use, not entirely sure how the science works on this one, but they can use light to like teleport, sort of like they can travel great distances. I guess you could say like at light speed or faster. Like they just, they can teleport using light somehow. Haven't figured out all the like details of that, but that's basically their abilities. Also, I don't think I touched on this when I was talking about them before, but the Arun live in basically glowing white balls. Like there's like a city in the north of Katariana that's like their capital city basically, and it's just basically filled with a bunch of like glowing white balls just like spread out over a sheet of ice, which is only a little terrifying, I think, but it's fun.
Only a little.
I love the aesthetic of it. Like there's a single like giant white castle made out of like white stone and stuff and covered in sheets and sheets of ice because it's been there for so long and it's cold, because they basically live in like the North Pole, like the Arctic, or the equivalent of that on Katariana. So there's like a giant castle covered in ice, and then it's just surrounded by a bunch of like glowing white orbs. Yeah.
Damn.
So that's kind of the celestial magic, as I've called it. They have like other things that they can do, they're probably like the most broken of like all of the magic systems. Hence why they kind of live in white balls in the Arctic and don't talk to anyone most of the time. I'm actually going to jump down. We're going to ignore the dark and come back to that at the end. So I'm going to jump down to the row below it, where there should be 6 symbols, and it's labeled Beastwalkers. These guys are like the most simple. They're basically just shapeshifters, and each of the symbols represents like a different like group of shapeshifters. So the first one in silver, Wavi, that's the werewolves or the wolf shapeshifters. They can turn into like wolves and other similar canines. The one beside it, Chief, they're the foxes. They can turn into like foxes.
Is that the orange one?
Yeah, that's an orange.
Okay.
Beside that, in dark gray, you have Gavuks. Those are like the centaurs. They have like horse generally shapeshifting. Beside that is the Zamern, which are mermaids. Next over is the Thikan, the birds. They can turn into birds. And then at the end, in purple, I stopped saying the colors. The Zamern are in teal, the Thikan are in dark blue, and then the Katath are in purple. And they can turn into cats. So yeah, there's not really a lot to go into there. They're pretty self-explanatory. They have like a fully humanoid form and a fully animal form, but they can also like put themselves at like in between states.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Oh,
Yeah.
like fucking skinwalkers.
I don't wanna pull from that because that's like
It's better what I was gonna
I don't
say.
wanna like appropriate Native American myths or anything.
Oh, that's true.
Fair.
What are you gonna say, Dean?
I'm not gonna say it.
Are you thinking cat girls?
Shut up. Move on.
Because I'm not judging you because that's where it started. But like, yeah, they can look like that. Usually
I'm such a degenerate.
Oh my god. But they usually look like slightly less human. Like, they're not going to look like a human with cat ears and a tail. They're going to be like more, like their bodies shift more than that.
Okay.
When they do that.
Yeah.
So they're not like directly skinwalkers, but sort of like that general idea. Like it's sort of like they're like the midway between like a human and an animal sort of thing going on.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what I'm kind of.
They can be in that form. Yeah.
That's
and
really
so
cool.
that's why I have like centaurs and mermaids in this group, is because in the case of centaurs, generally when we think of them, it's like the human upper torso and the horse legs, right? And so they can have that form, but they can also be like fully human or fully horse or like other similar creatures, like deer and stuff as well.
Excuse my shit, but like, oh man, it's finally in Alex's story that I'm gonna see a centaur with human legs and a horse head.
I mean, it's possible. But yeah, and then the way that like works is that different societies have like different expectations of that. For centaurs, the Gavuks, it's generally considered like culturally appropriate to be in an in-between state, and that's why we're like that. There's a Marin are similar, where they have like the half state is kind of the default state of their society. That's what's considered like appropriate. And then when it comes to the other ones, actually the birds tend to be pretty like half and half as well. But then the other 3, the wolves, the foxes, and the cats, tend to be like you're either one or the other. And generally the in-between state is considered like rude almost. So there's just like different social, like societal expectations in terms of that kind of stuff. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. So that's Beastwalkers. And then we're moving on to natural magic. And this is, so I have 7 symbols in here. The first symbol is like a bronze circle with a dot in the middle of it. It's just the astrological symbol for the sun, but we can pretend it's not. That actually represents the Watiern people, which are, I think I've described them before. They're just like the basic, like most humanoid race of the bunch. They don't really have magic. They're just, yeah, they're just like normal people, but I put them on here anyway so they wouldn't feel excluded. And then the 4 symbols beside it represent the 4 like classical elements in order: fire, water, earth, and air. And then, so yeah, basically these are like the Wechelen is what the 5 of them are called collectively. And then fire is Folulen, water is Shikalen, earth is Nyothalen, and air is Zuxelen.
Can I just give a quick like disclaimer right now? Or like
Sure.
a quick thing right now? For anyone listening that is taking down notes and is thinking of implementing all of this into the story, and you don't think, and if you're basically ripping us off, you're a piece of shit.
That's a crime.
Yeah.
That's a felony.
If you've been listening up until this point and you're only
Like-
just now hearing this, you're a piece of shit. We don't need to remind you of this.
Yeah.
These are all our ideas.
Yeah, if you're listening to this and taking down notes to like copy this stuff and you end up publishing it, know that this audio is like a recording. Like it's like we can use this in legal evidence in a plagiarism case. So
Exactly.
like if you rip us off, like we'll ruin your fucking life. So don't do it.
Yeah. You take any of Alex's amazing ideas and try to make it your own, you're a motherfucker.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you,
Welcome.
Gabe.
That goes
Same
for my
goes to
ideas.
your stories also.
Yeah, that goes for my stories and for Gabe's. If you take
That
any
is
of
actually
it,
that's actually the reason I've been so hesitant to talk about my stories on this podcast. So I looked up plagiarism law. So yeah, I know this shit. If you're listening to this to be a plagiarist, you're a dead man. I'll
Yeah.
literally come for you.
Yeah, we've talked about our stories how many times on these. Like if you go into our world building, or if you go into like our characters and and we definitely 100% know that these are our characters, you're a piece of shit. Anyway, just thought I'd put that out there.
Shall I continue then?
Yes. Unless you want to start like trashing on plagiarists in your own way.
I think you guys did a good job of it.
All right. You know what? I might
But
make this
yes.
our intro.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, the Wechelen are, as I said, basically the like basic race of the planet. They're like the most numerous in terms of like how many there are. That's what numerous means. But yeah, so they're based on like the 4 classic elements, as I said, and they look mostly human, but then their elements kind of like shape the way that they look as well. We've all been drawing comparisons to other media, but if you want to think like kind of how Genasi are in Dungeons and Dragons, they're kind of like that. In that, like, you know, if you're Folulen fire, they tend to have like bright, really like bright colored hair and like reds and oranges and yellows. Their eyes tend to glow a little bit. Their skin kind of looks kind of ashy sometimes. With water, their hair tends to be like, again, reflect the state. It often looks wet and dripping. Again, their eyes, because I mean, who doesn't love magic eyes? Their eyes tend to kind of reflect the state of water. Not necessarily like blue, but they just like, there's something about them that reminds someone looking at them of water. And like, again, their skin tends to be very smooth. For the Nyothalen, their hair is kind of coarser, thicker. They tend to have like a lot like rougher skin, kind of rockier. Nyothalen are actually more like plant-based than earth-based in my world. Like they can like make plants grow and that kind of stuff. Like they don't really have control over rocks or anything, but they still tend to kind of reflect like the rocky atmosphere, and again, their eyes tend to be very earthy colors. And then Zuxelen again tend to be like they tend to have very light hair that like floats, kind of. A lot of times, like the character Josin in the Diamond Dagger is Zuxelen, and his hair is often described as like cloud-like. Again, their eyes can like reflect the sky sometimes, so it'll like look blue or it'll look like midnight black. Or you can have like the midnight, or not midnight, sunrise, sunset kind of colors. They have pretty eyes, and yeah, they tend to have like a lighter step to them. If that makes sense. So like it's very much when you look at them, you can tell which element they've been claimed by, essentially. This type of magic tends to be most of the magic. All of the magic in this world tends to be pretty hereditary. So like in the case of the Beastwalkers, I should have mentioned this earlier, but in the case of the Beastwalkers, if your parents are Beastwalkers, you're also going to be a Beastwalker. That's how it works. There's also kind of like intermingling. So like, if one of your parents was like Wavi and one of your parents was Wechelen, then you tend to be one or the other, and you can't really be both.
So then to pose a question, would it then be like one would be a more dominant trait then, or is it more just like a 50-50 chance of either or?
Yeah, it tends. I think the Beastwalkers tend to be like the more dominant.
Okay.
It's not always the case because genetics are weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, that tends to be the case. Hence why there's like a lot of like story stuff about the Beastwalkers not being treated great in the past. Because of that, because it was like, again, drawing on like werewolf lore, it was seen as kind of like an infection, which it wasn't. Like they're not the kind of werewolves where they can like bite people and they become werewolves.
Yeah.
They're just shapeshifters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I only ask because of like the whole dominant recessive genes thing.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, and then in terms of like if you have a parent that's like if you had a parent that's a wolf and a parent that's a cat, then it's kind of at that point it's kind of a 50-50 which one you end up being.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to ask.
Yeah. Anyway, back to natural magic. In the row below the Wechelen, I have two more symbols. The first one in like light purple is Kilbris, and these are what I've been calling witches in my world. I think originally how they started out, this kind of like plays into the evolution of the races and how they like changed over time. But the Kilbris were originally Wachirn, that is like magicless people who were kind of like, but what if we like made our own magic? And so they kind of started finding ways to use like still natural stuff, but they started finding ways to like combine it and make it into their own. Their magic is like the hardest to explain, I think, but it could also be like combinations of stuff where they're like, oh, if I have water and I have like a plant, I can like combine that and make magic. And then they also have kind of like artificial magic in that they can take things like herbs and stuff and mix them together and come up with potions and stuff. That's kind of their domain. Is they don't have like natural born magic, so they kind of had to learn how to make their own. And like enough time has passed that in the modern period in my world, Kyobris magic is also pretty inherent, but it tends to be something that is more learned than, more like taught and learned than it is just something that people have. And then the last one are the Bris Ha, which are, I call them like psychics, and they have magic they're kind of like another offshoot, and they have magic that's kind of related to the body and the mind. So they're the ones who would have things like visions of the future. They're the ones that can do things like telekinesis, like that sort of magic. um, is very like explicit to them, but then they can also do stuff like related to the body. Like they'd also be the healers, and the people who can like, rip your body in half with their mind if they wanted to. And yeah, and they'd have like mental shields and stuff to protect against each other, and they'd have like telepathy so they can like talk. Some of them, it's like in their case they don't tend to be able to access everything, but rather have to learn like specific types. But that's kind of how their magic works.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And
going
they're also
backtracking a little bit, there's nothing wrong, focusing on, I'm not even going to try saying it, but like focusing on like your four Aristotelian elements. That's always a cool magic system to have.
So it's a classic.
Yeah. But like,
It's yeah.
witches getting their own magic system, shit, that's great.
Yeah. And the witches are really fun. Actually, the witches and the Brisa are both really fun. Like they're really fun to just like design characters because they tend to look very eccentric.
You're gonna have to send me like a document how to like pronounce these.
It's like once you
Because
know
I don't know
how
if I
to
can
pronounce
copy and
them-
paste these. I don't know if I can copy and paste what you wrote down for timestamps, Alex.
Yeah. I mean, once you like know the pronunciation, it's not that hard because it's like every letter is pronounced the same way all the time with like a few exceptions. But
Mhm.
yeah, so that's like what I call the natural magic. And those are the most numerous. That's the most common type of magic in the world. Yeah, and then we have the Fae, which kind of lore are actually related to like the Fae on a different planet in the solar system. And so their magic is also really hard to explain because it's very specific.
Mhm.
So the first one on there is the Vamurth. I tend to translate them as pixies. They have like these guys all are very like classic like Fae lore, I guess. So the pixies are tend to have very like elemental magic as well, but their magic tends to be more specific. They're the most closely related to the Uranian fairies, Urania being the other planet in the system, and like they have 16 tribes of magic on Urania, and so the Vamorth magic tends to reflect that. So, for example, one of the realms, I guess, on Urania is Ura, and their magic is described as mist and dew and sometimes sea foam. So you can see that it's kind of it's still like elemental magic, but it's like a lot more specific.
Mhm.
And then the next one that you can see in like the cream color is the Muvikuno. The Muvikuno are, I tend to call them like imps or sprites. They're very short, very natural. They tend to like blend into their surroundings. They also they're an interesting race. But yeah, their magic is very, very like plant based, specifically like flowers, leaves, that kind of stuff, like exclusively. And again, it tends to be very specific. So like a person might be able to grow like roses, and that's it. And then it's just if they want to use their magic in specific ways, they have to be able to figure out how to do it in unique ways, I guess. And then the last one on here is the Mirun, which are sirens, sort of. They're also really fun. They have cool myths and stuff that I might go into in that episode. We'll see. But they're basically
Take a shot for
kind
how
of a
many times we've talked about that next episode.
It's gonna be a fun episode. Magic is very
Definitely will be.
tied to to myths and gods.
Oh yeah.
Like I didn't even go into the myth. Like there's a whole legend about how the Beastwalkers became Beastwalkers that I haven't even gone into.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so the Mirun are they're sirens, so they have an affinity for both the air and the water. When I was designing like architecture and stuff for my world like last year sometime, and their buildings, their architecture was really fun to design because they have these like towers sticking up off the side of cliffs because they'll like nest in the top and then they can just dive down into the ocean, and so they can breathe underwater and like have like water capable abilities, but then they also have the ability to fly. So they're pretty cool, and then they have like control over both the elements of water and air. So that's them. So that's like the Fae group, which is
Nice.
like, again, like it's natural magic, but it's like specific natural magic. So I kind of like differentiate them that way.
Mm-hmm.
And now I guess we have to go back to dark magic, which is, I mean, I said the celestial magic was pretty broken, but the dark magic is also pretty broken. So the two symbols that I have in there are the symbols of the Varun and the Vabris. Vabris. The Varun are basically vampires, and vampires can come from any of the Beastwalker or natural or Fae races. The Fae Varun don't happen very often, but they do exist. The celestial beings are like on a whole other level, so that doesn't happen. And then the Varbris are basically like they're super powered vampires, sort of. I tend to call them warlocks when I'm using an English word for it. And they're basically vampires that have undergone a ritual of dark magic to enhance their magical ability to make them like super powerful. And I'm like one of those people that doesn't like buy into, it's a really common thing in fantasy stories to be like, oh, this race is usually good and this race is usually evil. And I don't buy into that. The Varbris are my only exception because in order to undergo the ritual of dark magic, they have to murder at least 3 people. So generally speaking, if you're going through that, you're probably not a good person.
Just watch. There'll be people that have been reading your shit for a while, and they'll be like, "Oh, wait, hold on, wait, I'll challenge that." You're gonna write
it's not something that can be like forced upon someone. Because like, here's my thing with like putting alignments on races or whatever, is people are just like born to their race. They can't really change it.
Mm-hmm.
And so to say that you're more likely to be good or evil based on who you're born to is stupid and blatantly false.
Fair.
Yeah.
But the Varbris, it's not like you can't accidentally become Varbris, right? You literally have to like sit down and go, yes, I'm going to murder 3 people. This is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to get more powerful as a result. It can't be like forced onto someone, like people can't go under the ritual against their will. So, I mean, if you want to challenge it, go for it, but good luck.
You hear that? Whatever Alex's fandom name is called? You got this. Surprise her.
Yeah. So their magic kind of resembles celestial magic. And again, because the Varun can be from any of the races, basically, when they become Varun, they still have their like natural magic that they were born with, if they were born with any. And then on top of that, there's like certain vampire things. Like for example, they're a lot harder to kill, and they tend to be like a little stronger, a little faster than normal people. just because they have this like enhanced athleticism, I believe is what it's called on the superpower wiki. Um, and obviously they have to drink blood to survive. And then the Varbris take like whatever abilities they were born with naturally, and then they take like the vampire stuff, and then they just kind of like level it up. And they have like specific dark ritual spells that are intended to copy celestial magic to an extent. So Varbris can learn how to open portals to like travel between great distances using like dark magic instead of light, and like that kind of stuff. I haven't figured out like all the details of what they're capable of, but it's not a lot of good stuff in there. These are the people that I think of because you have that question on your list, Dean, of like why haven't they used the magic to take over the world? These are the guys that are trying.
All right, fair.
So that's basically how the magic system works. On Katariana, it's pretty like it's a pretty normal thing on Katariana. Like there's not a lot of like it's not like a shocking thing. Like it's very much part of everyday life, and it has been for a pretty long time.
Mm-hmm.
In the Diamond Dagger specifically, some of it tends to be a bit newer. But for the most part, like they've had the like elemental magic around for quite a while.
Yeah.
The witches and the psychics don't exist at that point. And then there's Beastwalkers, obviously, that aren't looked upon too well because, curses and stuff. But yeah, for the most part, like magic is just such a part of everyday life that like it's as normal as like cell phones are in our world.
Mm-hmm.
It's like not everyone has it, but most people do.
Yeah. And while people, I guess with the cell phone analogy, while people have it, there are some people that just don't know how to use it to its full extent, I guess.
Yeah. And that's one thing I didn't really touch on is like education of magic, I guess. And so if we want to go for like the Beastwalkers, their magic is very like instinctual, because it's just like shape-shifting. So they don't really have to learn much about it. It's just something that they can do from like a very young age. For like the natural magic, it's something that like they have the ability to do, but it has to be like refined. If you had like an untrained, it's I hate drawing the comparison, but like it's like an avatar where they have the ability, but they can't really use it to its full potential until they've like undergone the training.
Yeah.
And the same applies to the Kyobris and the Brisha as well. And then for the Fae, again, it tends to be very intuitive magic for them, where like the Vamorth especially can undergo training to like strengthen it. But for the most part, it's just like part of who they are.
Yeah, there's always like something interesting when you're going into like how people learn this stuff, right? Like it's not always like, obviously it shouldn't just be introduced into the story like, yeah, this character has magic. But now I guess people, I guess readers like us, right? Like guys, like we're always like, but how? How they learn that?
Yeah.
But
It's interesting to think about like how different types of magic are learned as well.
mm-hmm.
Because like I mean, if you're in the case of witches, because like they are basically people who started out with no magic and had to figure out how to give themselves magic. There's like a huge learning curve there. Especially in like the early days when witchcraft was first becoming a thing. And then like again, as it goes on, it starts to feel more like an intuitive type of magic, but that's just because there's more knowledge around it, and so people can start teaching them how to use it from a younger age to the point where it feels like it's something they've known their whole life, even if that's not necessarily true.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. So, is there anything else worth sharing before I ask a few questions about it, or?
From here, I don't think so. Ask me questions. That'll help.
Okay. Well, referring to the 12 referring to the 12 questions on magic, because Katariana is the setting for a lot of stories, I wanted to focus on the one question that says, how does said magic relate to the character plot and theme of the book? Like, how is it that, like, between what your 5 different magic systems, like, how is it different between the Diamond Dagger and whatever other story is set in Katariana?
A lot of them are okay. So in the Diamond Dagger specifically, a lot of the magic is the natural magic, and the lack thereof, because like this isn't a spoiler. What like the opening of Diamond Dagger is that you find out that Arahe, like I said the Wachelen tend to resemble their element. Arahe resembles the element of earth, like in her appearance, like to an extent, not like as fully as people who actually have the abilities do, but she has like the image of someone who should have magic, but she doesn't, which is like kind of a huge insecurity for her because she has this brother who has like this amazing like air abilities, and he's like kind of a prodigy at it, and that kind of stuff. And so for her, it's kind of a big deal that like she should have this magic, but she doesn't. And she kind of feels like there's something wrong with her. So that kind of plays a big part into that. You also have a bit of like the Beastwalker stuff and then a little bit of the celestial stuff going on, but that's spoilers, so I don't want to get into it. And then if we want to look at one of my other stories set in this world, which is currently titleless, it's about the dark magic. It's about these 2 sisters. They're both Katath, and they basically become the prey of Arun, who's trying to go through the process to become Varbris. And so that's huge plot point for that story. Probably a bit of a spoiler, but oh well. In terms of other ones, Cloud Rider doesn't really have a plot yet because I wrote it intending it to be a short story, and then I shared it with my creative writing class, and everyone told me I should continue it.
That's the fucking one.
Yeah. But that's about. I think she's Zuxalin. I don't remember. I don't have my notebook with me either. But it's about a girl, like a girl who goes to university on a flying city, basically.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I've had a lot of fun with designing the cities in this world. There's just flying cities. It's fine.
Flying cities. Oh my god, flying cities should be a definite thing. I always love that visual of like a whole city just like resting on like an or on like a floating hunk of rock or something. And that's a side tangent, but like I always love that kind of aesthetic.
Yeah.
A nice visual. There's also like floating cities like on the ocean where there's just like a bunch of ships.
Yeah.
As a city that like floats through the ocean and stuff.
That's a cool.
And there's also like
it's like Waterworld, but cooler.
Yeah, Waterworld, but also like probably a better budget and a lot more fantasy heavy. And less Kevin Costner.
Yeah, and then there's also like walking cities a la Howl's Moving Castle kind of aesthetic as well.
I was gonna mention a lot of the sort of the Beastwalker stuff and like the that sort of stuff and like the natural magic stuff really like gave me like Ghibli vibes.
I second that.
I'm gonna take that as a compliment.
It is a big compliment. Are you kidding me?
No, I mean it as a compliment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and then
I'm
those
sorry.
cities specifically are very tied to the natural magic because there's lots of like Shikalen and the cities on the ocean because they help move it with their magical abilities. There's lots of Zuxalen in the flying cities because they help control it with their magic as well.
Yeah.
And there's lots of Neothalen in the there's like two types of moving cities on the land. There's like the actual walking cities like Howl's Castle, and there's the ones that are just like groups of nomadic people that like wander around setting up cities as they go and then taking them down and continuing. Like there's both of those. Um yeah, so there's lots of moving cities in my world because I
Yeah.
think they're cool.
It's
very cool.
That's a great aesthetic.
Yeah. I was gonna comment on I'm very interested to see how the dark magic is written in context of the story or in the context of a scene. I would love to see just how all of that plays out.
Same for me, but with the Celestials, because y'all know I cream for Eldritch gods.
Yeah, this is completely ignoring Makatilo too, which I mentioned before we started recording, I think, or earlier. There's like a city in Katariana called Makatilo, and it's literally an eldritch city. It exists on like all levels of existence.
Yeah.
Um,
As a side tangent,
and
I don't know if Alex is wanting for me to talk about this, but basically, she was stuck on writing for a while, and suddenly she just popped in the chat being, Makatilo is the answer.
God, it's because I had like an epiphany, and I was like, oh my God, it's the answer. Like I had because I have like a bunch of stories where I'm like a lot of stories where characters go somewhere, and then time gets fucky, and then they come back.
Yeah.
And I was I was thinking about Makatilo, and I was thinking about one thing that I really wanted in my stories is kind of a way to tie them all together, like not like make them in the same universe, because obviously I've said it's the multiverse, my multiverse, I guess. And so they don't really work if they exist in the same universe, but I still wanted kind of a way, like I wanted something like an Easter egg almost in all of my stories.
Yeah.
And like I was talking with one of my friends who has like characters that are like time travelers and dimension jumpers and stuff like that. I was like, that's like a pretty common thing. And like the reason I actually wanted this in the first place was because I was talking to someone else like a long time ago in a creative writing type class type thing, who said that in the first story they ever wrote, they had a character that, like a side character that was like, oh, I want to be a time traveler. And then in every story they've written since, that character has like made a cameo appearance somewhere in the story. And I was like, that's a really cool idea. I want something like that, but I didn't want to like steal their idea, obviously.
Yeah. So you just went and
then
made a whole city.
Okay, here's the thing though. Makatilo has existed since like the earliest, some of the earliest versions, if not the earliest versions of Diamond Dagger. So it was kind of like an obvious answer because like in the original version of it, it was just like that's where she goes to get the Diamond Dagger, the titular Diamond Dagger, and it was guarded by like a demon.
Yeah.
And then I decided I didn't really want demons in this world. So then this character kind of became like I don't even know how to explain what he is. He's like some sort of eldritch being. He's not the same as the Arun or the Drar, but he's like on that level, I guess. Except when I started thinking about Makatilo, I was like, okay, well now it needs, if this one character is there, and I've added another character there as well from like in the Diamond Dagger when I was trying to figure out how to add more characters to the story. So I was like, so what if it just has like these guardians that like or like sentinels that like protect the city? Because if you have like a city that lets you jump between dimensions and stuff, people are gonna do stuff with that.
Yeah.
So the sentinels are kind of in place to prevent people from doing that. But I figure if you're the guard of an eldritch city, like an eldritch interdimensional city, you probably got some knowledge. So if people wanted to come ask you for information, I mean, why not make that like a thing?
Fair.
So yeah, I found so there's also Makatilo going on. But we don't have to talk about it.
Yeah, let's touch on that in another thing. Just talking about like world building part 2, but I do want to touch on one thing really quick. So you had talked about how like previously how Makatilo was involved in like some of your earliest drafts of Diamond Dagger, and going back to that actually, and I asked Gabe this question about his magic system, but about your magic system, like how has it changed since you first started writing within Katariana? Like your magic system, how has it kind of changed like since you started writing, and like obviously as you were becoming a better writer and whatnot?
Like I said, Katariana is kind of like my most boring magic system. So I think the like only thing that's really changed about it is that it's become like defined. Because like in like the original stories, I didn't really have like a definition of the magic. It was just kind of there. And as a result, it was really easy to just kind of fuck around with it and do whatever I wanted. Like the Varun are the early versions of the Varun are just crazy. They can do everything. I'm like, how does anyone ever kill them? This is stupid. So yeah, I think like they're one of the people or one of the things that I've pulled back a lot, and kind of just made like they're like vaguely superhuman, not like to the point that they're completely unbeatable.
Yeah.
Because I mean, is this a spoiler? A lot of the bad guys in my story are vampires, or in my stories are vampires. Which I mean, I guess makes sense if you have like that kind of vague superhuman ability. Also, there's a cult going on, but we don't have to get into that either.
Save
but
that for
yeah,
the Gods and Myths episode.
I mean, it's not really a real god; it's a fake god. That's why it's a cult.
Fair. Okay. Yeah. So.
But yeah.
Go ahead.
But yeah, I think I've just defined it more, and I've like set the boundaries a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's I think like at one point, like we've all kind of reflected on like how far the magic system or our respective magic system has come, and I think it's interesting. It's interesting just looking back on like how obviously not just like your writing style improves, right? But like obviously like how you incorporate details, especially for something as comprehensive and as interesting as our respective magic systems are. Like right now, this recording is going on for almost 2.5 hours. Like yeah, it's
almost midnight.
Yeah, for us. I don't know I don't know if anyone else is first of all still listening, and secondly, like how far you've gotten, but like episodes like this, like as long as they are, like they always are part of my favorite ones, because I always love learning more about like I always love learning more about like my
People
friends'
can listen
worlds.
in chunks. That's what the timestamps are for.
Exactly. So I think that's it. I don't really have much else to really kind of contribute. Like we've been speaking for quite a while, and with so much content, like I don't know really where else to expand on this other than talking about like the wider implications of the magic system, such as the gods influencing it and whatnot. And as everyone knows, or everyone should know by now, we have an episode for that coming soon. So
I'm gonna talk even more.
Yeah. So Is there anything else you guys want to comment on before
I'm
we?
gonna have to figure out what I want to talk about.
Yeah, yeah. But
Um,
anyway, is there anything you guys want to maybe say before we start wrapping up, or?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Well, then let's start closing the show. So, thanks for everyone for listening in. This has been the InkGuild Podcast, and you can find all of us. Oh my God. You can find all of our social media down in the description below, both as the InkGuild and individually. Thanks to everyone who helps with this, including Gabe for the thumbnails, Georgia for the channel art, Alex for your help in promoting. Thank you to all of the musicians out there that aren't copyright striking your music in our videos. That means a hell of a lot. And I think for already such a long episode, I've been debating if we were going to do a final sign off or not, but let's do that since we've already pushed the time limit. So let's talk about the one magic system that we like. So out of everything that we've talked about, what would be the one magic system?
In another piece of fiction, or
No, within ours.
oh
Yeah. So I know that's going to be hard, but I'll basically lead by example. Because it's the one that I've fleshed out the most, probably it would be the Zerot for me. So the Lightning Arcanic school. I don't know why. That's always the one that I like from the beginning. I always associated as a separate magic system because obviously in Avatar, lightning was basically a fuse between between fire and air. But I felt like with so much power within lightning itself, I wanted to make it separate. And with how integrated it is with Porter and with Porter's story at large, it definitely is the most important one. Plus, I mean, I was thinking fan art wise, and I'm thinking like Porter with like like holding a lightning bolt in her hand. That is a striking image. That's badass. I'd love to see fan art of Porter just like casting lightning bolts. That's sick. That's my favorite. Gabe, how about you? Which of your codes is the most interesting or your favorite?
I think that the code I like writing them, like, sort of speaks for itself by how much the conversation we had about it is blood codes and anything relating to the Titanians or the vampires in the world of Ildry. I love writing about the vampires in this world. They're my favorite thing to write about. The blood codes themselves are not like my most interesting magic system. I don't think. I think the power codes are more like are more plot relevant, but like just in terms of which I like writing the most, I like writing the vampire characters the most. There's a couple of vampire characters who I will just I have shoved into so much of the story just because I love having them around and having them exist and spew communist ideology while basically puncturing into their deck to like summon spears made of blood.
Nice. All right, Alex, how about you?
Is that anime that has the blood magic beyond the boundary or something?
Yeah, she has a blood scythe.
I need to finish that anime.
I need to start that anime.
For me, I'm having a hard time deciding, just because I feel like all of my magic systems are underdeveloped. But I think the like natural magic, like the elemental magic, and then the witch and like psychic magic beyond that is kind of the most interesting for me because of how it like shaped the like societies and stuff, and also just the character designs for all those groups are really fun to play with.
Cool. All right. Yeah, so this was a very long episode. It's our longest one so far, but it definitely was really fun for me to listen through. I'm pretty sure everyone else had a blast listening through. And for those who are listening, thank you for, sparing a few hours with us. Remember, don't steal our shit. But
Yeah. Unlike with other IP rights, you own the copyright to your work as soon as you create it. Regardless of merit or commercial value, Canadian laws consider all of creative works to be copyright material. That's a long sentence, but it's basically the long way of saying, if you steal the shit that we say on this podcast, I will break quarantine to strangle you to death.
I'll break your kneecaps too.
Yeah.
And then we'll drop kick you into the sun.
By strangle you to death, I mean... And those are all very violent ways of saying I will take you to a court and I will ruin you. And also, just in general, if you're a plagiarist, you're not gonna be good enough to I'm not trying to say I'm a genius or anything, but if you're a plagiarist, then you've already fucked up, and you're not gonna be able to make something interesting out of listening to other people's ideas. Everyone's gonna know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as small as an audience as we have, we still are very close together. So we'll know if Alex's work is out there, but it wasn't penned by her immediately. So just saying, there's your warning. But with all that being said, thanks again for everyone tuning in. Have a good night.
Good night.